This
online.
conference will now be recorded.
Oh, you're good. Hey, we're gonna be looking at First Samuel. So on y'all, those of y'all that are online, y'all can, I'm sharing my screen with you, and those of you that are here, you can just look up on your phones or open your Bibles to First Samuel. We're just gonna be looking at First Samuel chapter 1 all the way through it today. And my goal is to get all the way through First Samuel this semester and maybe do Second Samuel next semester. But there's a lot in there, so it might take this semester and next semester to do First Samuel. But if you remember Samuel, the book of First Samuel and Second Samuel, First Samuel and Second Samuel go along with First Kings and Second Kings. They kind of go in order, and then First Chronicles and Second Chronicles, they kind of tell all of Samuel's and Kings. So that's why when you're reading the Bible, sometimes you read First Samuel, Second Samuel, and then you keep going, and you get in Chronicles, and you go, "Wow, why are we talking about David again?" Because it's kind of like the Gospels. People wrote about the same thing, but they wrote it in different ways, or just from different perspectives, or whatever. And I prefer the Samuel and Kings versions over the Chronicles versions, because Chronicles has a whole lot of, this was the daddy of so-and-so, who was the daddy of so-and-so. It really chronicles who the people were, and there's not as much narrative in it and story in it. It's a lot of chronicles, but Samuel is pretty much, it's like the Gospels. It's pretty much a narrative, and it just tells what's going on in that time. So we're going to be looking at Samuel. Samuel was the prophet that was there for Saul and David, and then then he passed away. But we're going to be looking at this with Samuel, and it's really good. So y'all enjoy it. This is where we get all the fun stuff with David and Goliath and Saul and Jonathan and all of that. So we can learn a lot from it. So we're going to be just looking at chapter 1. So, and then I'm reading out the New Living Translation. So if y'all follow with that, if not, it'll be pretty similar to what y'all have. But there was a man named Elkanah. What? Elkanah. Thank you, Jody. There's a man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zup in the hill country of Ephraim. So we remember when they went into the promised land and they divided it all up, they divided the different areas to the different tribes. The 12 tribes went to different places, and Ephraim was one of those tribes, and this is where this guy was from. He was from the lineage of Ephraim, and he lived there, so that's where he's from. He had 2 wives, which, as all y'all know, in the Old Testament, people had multiple wives. Jacob had 2 wives and 2 concubines, and that's where the 12 tribes of Israel came from. So it's just a different time and a different place, and that's just the way it was back then. But Elkanah had 2 wives. One of them's name was Hannah, and the other one's name was Peninnah. How do you say it, Jenna?
It's like penny and then nah. Peninnah.
Peninnah. Thank you. She's my Hebrew scholar here.
Yeah.
Peninnah. So Hannah and Peninnah. Okay, and here's where it is. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. So Peninnah, and back in this day, if you had kids, that was really kind of your identity. Your identity was who your dad was or who your husband was, and then it went to if you had kids. And if you didn't have kids, a bunch of people looked at it that you were not blessed, that you were a sinner. There was all this negative stuff tied to whether or not you had kids. So we know from the very beginning that Hannah, when she didn't have kids, something was up. And also, it also goes with the story, Abraham, Sarah couldn't have kids. It goes through a lot of scripture where the wife had a hard time having kids. Elizabeth couldn't have kids when she had John the Baptist and all of this. So throughout the Bible, God has always shown mercy to people that couldn't have kids. So this is one of those stories, but this is who Hannah was. Peninnah had children, but Hannah didn't. Each year, Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heaven's armies at the tabernacle. I really like the way they say that there, to the Lord of heaven's armies at tabernacle. That's one of my favorite titles for God. I just love that, the Lord of heaven's armies. And they went to the tabernacle. So we got to remember that at this point in time, this is when they had a tabernacle. And the tabernacle was the tent that Moses was instructed to build. The presence of God was there. And God was there as a fire at night and a cloud during the day. And when he moved his presence, that's when they'd pack it all up and they would leave. So in the 40 years before they went in the promised land, the tabernacle led them around. God led them around, and the tabernacle was where God was. And then when they went into the promised land, the tabernacle, God set up shop in the tabernacle at various places, but he set it up at this place called Shiloh. And Shiloh is a real interesting place in Israel. I actually got to visit Shiloh, and Shiloh is the longest place the tabernacle was ever set up. And the tabernacle was set up in Shiloh for 369 years. That tent stayed in one place. So it was very commonplace for all of the people, all of the 12 tribes to come on an annual basis, to come to Shiloh to offer sacrifices to the Lord. And it was pretty neat. And I'll talk more about it when we start talking about Samuel and Eli and some of the stuff that happened there. But it's really neat. They dug it out, and you can really tell where the tabernacle was, where the houses were, and pretty much where Eli's house was, who we're going to meet here in just a second. But it's a really neat archaeological site. So they would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli. So Eli was the main priest, and Hophni and Phinehas were his sons. And we're going to hear about Hophni and Phinehas later. Hophni and Phinehas weren't good people. I don't know if you remember that, but Hophni and Phinehas, we'll read the story later, but Hophni and Phinehas, Eli would not discipline them, and they did things that were not right in the sight of the Lord. So Hophni and Phinehas were the ones that were kind of overseeing the tabernacle at this time under the eyes of their father Eli. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Peninnah and each of her Peninnah and each of her children. So when they would come and they'd offer the bull or offer the ram or whatever it was, they would sacrifice it. They would give a choice portion of it to the priest. For them to offer up as a burnt sacrifice, and then the rest of it they got to keep. Of the meat to Hannah, he choice portion because the Lord had given her no children. So each year they'd come down here, she would get one. Peninnah was sitting there, and she would get her serving and an equal serving for each of her kids. So being jealous sometimes as women are, Peninnah, verse 6, it says that Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. So Hannah, you got to think about this. When Hannah would go to the tabernacle to worship God, she knew it would be a time that would not be pleasing for her because she was embarrassed because she didn't have kids. She was embarrassed because she knew that Peninnah would get more, and she didn't like it because she knew that Peninnah would make fun of her as she got her choice meat cuts and she didn't. And then in verse 7, it says this: year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. So it was like she had to endure it. This should be a high and holy time to go and worship at the tabernacle and to worship the Lord. That's where the presence of God was. It should have been great. But year after year, Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Then as they were there, she would taunt them, and it just killed Hannah. It said each time Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. You know, this was supposed to be some sort of celebration. You offer the sacrifice, you get the good meat, you eat it, and Hannah just couldn't even join in with it. It said that she wouldn't even eat. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would say. That's her husband. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask. Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted because you have no children? You know, this is just a good husband trying to be nice. He says, why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? You know, so I feel for
She
Elkanah.
throws the mustard at him.
You know, I feel for Elkanah because that's something that I've done. Oh, Jody, it's okay. You've got me.
He
You know,
does. He says that.
I say that all the
I'm
time.
here. Don't be sad. The kids have left.
Yeah, the kids don't live here. You have me. So I can relate to Elkanah. He was just trying to make his wife feel better. And I think Elkanah really did. I mean, he loved Hannah, and you can pick up in this that probably Hannah was his favorite wife, and he really cared, and he cared for him. But once, verse 9, but once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. She couldn't handle it. She wasn't eating. She didn't want to be there. So she got up and she went back in to the tabernacle to pray to God's presence. Eli, the guy that we met earlier, Eli the priest, was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance to the tabernacle. So people would come in, he would check them out, make sure that what tribe were they from, you know, all this, make sure they were supposed to be there. He'd let them in. Well, he lets them in, takes the offerings if they have offerings, and goes and off. He does his priestly duties. So he lets her in, he goes, and she goes over to where the altar is. And it says this, Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. And as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. So she is just pleading, you know, and she's been coming year after year after year, and it's just been torturous for her. And she's just finally had enough, and she's in there and she's sort of, Lord, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you. I will give him, Lord, but just please give me a son. And then in verse 12, it says this, as she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. So he's sitting over there, she's over here, he's watching her. And she's seeing her lips move, but hearing no sound. He thought she had been drinking. And this was common because we find out later that his sons were actually getting the people that came to the young women that came in and getting them drunk and doing other things with them that they shouldn't have been doing. And so he probably had seen drunk people in the tabernacle before. And he went over there. He saw that and he said, hey, throw away your wine. He demanded, must you come here drunk? He demanded, throw away your wine. And she says, oh, no, sir, she replied. I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. So I think there's something here that not talking about the drinking of the wine or anything stronger, but something to learn here from Hannah. She was very discouraged and she was pouring her heart out to the Lord. I think that there are times in our life where I think that we do get discouraged, and I think we can follow Hannah's lead here and we can pour our heart out to the Lord when we're discouraged. And so she was discouraged and she was pouring her heart out to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. And, you know, sometimes it's the easiest time when we're discouraged, we have anguish, we have sorrow, to take the time and to make the distance, to go to God's presence, to be with him. It's different now because God's with us in our heart. The Holy Spirit's here and we can go to him at any moment. But then I mean, you literally had to get up and go to where the presence of God was at the tabernacle. And year after year, even in this state, she would get up and go. And I think sometimes we get discouraged. We are full of anguish. We are sorrow. And sometimes I think we do run to God, but sometimes I think we hide from God and we just feel sorry for ourselves. We just can't do it. And I think we can learn a lesson here from Hannah that in those times when we're discouraged, full of anguish and sorrow, that we pour ourselves out to the Lord and we pray to him. And then Eli says this in verse 17, he says, in that case, go in peace, go in shalom. Go in shalom. May you have the fullness of God in your life. The shalom peace of God. May you have the fullness of God in your life as you leave. May the God of Israel grant the request that you have given him. She doesn't say what her request was. She just says, for I've been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. I'm very discouraged. And Eli says, hey, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you the request you have asked. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Then she thanks him. She gets up. She's a different person. She went back and began to eat again and was no longer sad. So I think that that's a tremendous turnaround for Hannah. This person of God, this man of God, the priest, Eli, assured her and said, hey, go in peace. May the shalom peace of God be with you, and may the God of Israel grant you the request that you have had. And that's what she needed. She needed the encouragement from him. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. That she went back and began to eat, and she was no longer sad. So I think that walk back home was different than the walk up. There was a change in her. The entire family, it says here in verse 19, the entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah, where Elkanah slept with Hannah. The Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. So her prayer was answered. I've heard of support groups called Hearts of Hannah. People that are just, they can't get pregnant, they're having troubles. And these support groups just have a heart of Hannah, and just, sometimes they get pregnant and they have the child, but I think the important part is more that they're pouring their hearts out to the Lord. They're going to the Lord with their grief and asking the Lord to meet them. And the Lord met Hannah at this time and gave her a son. She named him Samuel. So here we go. Bum, ba, da, dum. This is the whole 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. This is what we're here for. She named him Samuel. So one of the things that I like about this is that before Samuel was even born, God had a heart for Samuel, and God knew that he was going to use Samuel, and that he was going to use him to speak to the kings and to anoint David and to do all of this stuff. And I think the same can be said about us, is God knows us in our mother's wombs. I think God knows us before we're in our mother's wombs, and he knows what he desires for us, and he knows the life in which he wants us to live. And that's something that I think we can take solace in. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him. Okay, so the next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord, but Hannah did not go. So there's part of this that I find very interesting. Hannah didn't have to go all those other years. She could have told Elkanah, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. But even in her sorrow, even that she knew that Peninnah was going to make fun of her and ridicule her, even though that she knew that she was going to be sad, she made the choice all those years to go and to be in the presence of God and to pray. But she told Elkanah this next year, she said, I'm not going to go. Wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently. So she wanted to have more time and continue to raise her son and get him old enough to where she wasn't having to breastfeed him and all that. She should have very easily taken him on the trip. We know that people did that back then, but she chose not to. And she wanted to be with the boy. And then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him with the Lord permanently. So she was remembering the vow that she made to God. She said, if you bless me with a son, I will give him to you and he will be in your service for all of his life and he will never cut his hair. And Elkanah just says, okay, whatever you think is best, stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise. I think Elkanah knew that it was going to be hard for Hannah to give up her son, but Elkanah said, hey, do what you think you need to do, think what's best, stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise. So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. Verse 24, when the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. So I don't know if she just made a special trip or if it was like the same time next year. It kind of sounds like she just made a special trip that once the child was weaned, it was time to take him to Shiloh. Do you know?
One of the things that I learned was that weaning isn't just about no longer nursing, but it's actually growing up and being able to be somewhat independent. So like a child being able to dress themselves and being, let's say, potty trained or being able to get their own food or eat their own food, that type of thing. Not just an infant that no longer.
So we're not talking a year, we're talking
Right.
maybe
Like,
6 years.
Yeah, like 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scholar Jody.
You're welcome.
Uh,
That's why I get paid.
yeah. So she took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. And Hannah says this, sir, do you remember me? Hannah asked. I am the woman who stood here several years ago. Well, there you go. Several years ago, Jody. Several years ago, praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worshiped the Lord there. So I think that's really a great story that Hannah, in her place of being down so low, was brought to the place of being high. And then she continued to say, but Lord, this is about you. And I want him to be a blessing for you. And I want him to belong to the Lord his whole life. And then they worshiped again. Just as they worshiped again that first time when she found out that the Lord was going to give her a son, or that Eli said that the Lord would do what she had asked, she worshiped, and now she is worshiping after she is giving that son back to the Lord. So it's kind of this whole circle. So this is Samuel. And Samuel is going to be a great prophet of the Lord, and he's going to be used and says some very prophetic things through that. So this is the introduction to, and we are right at 7 o'clock. So any questions or comments about that? Anything stood out to y'all that y'all have any questions about? You know, guys, I realized I didn't share my screen with y'all. I'm sorry. I just went through that whole thing looking at it myself. So I'm sorry I didn't share the Bible verses with y'all. I had it pulled up on my.
That's totally okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just realized that I didn't share my screen, so I apologize. But did anything stand out to y'all, or did y'all notice anything, or anything ring true with y'all, or anything that y'all might want to add? Jody, any questions or comments or anything like that?
I like the cycle, or the full circle that Hannah went in, from anguish and despair and crying out to the Lord, you know, even looking drunk in that despair, to having her prayers answered, to giving back and sacrificing herself back to the Lord.
Yeah, because she was essentially kind of giving up her future, right? Because once your husband dies, the one that takes care of you is your son. So I hadn't thought about this until you were just saying that, but
Yeah.
in a way, she's relying on the Lord not to just take care of Samuel, but Lord needs to take care of me too. Because I don't know if she ever had any other kids. I mean, I might learn that as we read through Samuel, but I don't recall that she did. So that's true. She went full circle.
Mhm.
Anything else stand out to y'all, or comments or questions? Okay.
Why did the bull have to be 3 years old? And what did they do with the flour and the wine that they brought?
Why did the bull have to be 3 years old?
That they brought.
Yeah, or why did the bull have to be 3 years? I know it has to be kind of a grown bull, but I don't know why 3 years. I'd have to research that, Kendrick, to see if that was like some law in Leviticus or something. But the flour, I know this, they mixed that flour together with different oils and stuff, and they offered a sacrifice to God. And essentially, it's almost like they were making Fritos. If you read the so Fritos is made of corn though, but it might have been corn flour, so we don't know. But they would burn it in this oil stuff and burn it, and essentially it was just another way in which they burned something as a sacrifice to the Lord. And the wine, I'm sure there was some sort of offering that the wine was used for as well. So
Because the brothers were confiscating it.
yeah, the brothers, yeah, the two bad sons were confiscating them. And we learn about that in a little bit, in a couple chapters, about 2 chapters, we find out how good they were. So anything else? Any other questions? Well, Hob, you joined us right when we're wrapping it up, man.
Remind him we start at 6:30 now.
Yeah, I think he knows that.
I'm sorry.
I just got here at like
Uh,
6:55. I didn't realize y'all started earlier.
That's okay, y'all. I mean, we start about 6:35, but if y'all can't make it, we understand, but we're very
Solid
glad that
ending,
you
though.
joined us anyway. Oh, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. He said I had a solid ending, so that was good. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.